When my son's forgery ruined my firm and me, I turned into a waitress. One morning, a tycoon taunted, "Financial advice, waitress." He had no idea who I used to be. I looked at his papers. "You will be broke in 6 months." He brushed it aside with a laugh. Next morning, 6 a.m. sharp, he was on my doorstep. If you're watching this, subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let me take you back to where I began. 2 years ago, I was Catherine Wells, a senior partner in Wells & Associates Financial Consulting. I had corner offices downtown Chicago, managed portfolios with over $50 million in assets, and had a BMW that cost more than most people earn in a year. My clients included tech startup founders, real estate moguls, and old money families who put their family fortunes in my hands. Then my son Michael decided to be Gordon Gekko with other people's money. The FBI raid came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was reading through quarterly reports when Navy-suited agents burst through our mahogany doors as if they owned the place, which technically they did once they affixed those seizure warning labels to everything from my coffee mug to my diplomas. Michael had been playing with my signature for 8 months, moving money from one account to another, like he was running 3-card Monte with others' retirement funds. 2.7 million gone. My reputation, my license, and my mind. The irony was not lost on me. I had educated people for 30 years how to recognize financial warning signs, and my own son had been waving them in front of me. The media lost their minds. Financial advisors build a clientele in a Ponzi scheme. My name appeared on all the headlines. While I was victim number 1, the suits followed. Client civil cases who lost their nest egg. Criminal proceedings that exonerated me in law but destroyed me in business. Even vindicated. No one required money counsel from the woman whose relatives had pilfered hers for all they were worth. I was 68 years old by Christmas, with $47 in savings and a studio apartment in a district where the standard musical genre was sirens. It is then that I saw the help wanted posting at Murphy's Diner. Murphy's Diner was not so much fine dining as you could describe. The coffee was like it was run through worn-out gym socks. The vinyl booths were cracked more than a February Chicago sidewalk. And the fluorescent lighting made everyone appear to have some rare disease, but it cashed daily. Did not require references. And the owner, Tommy Murphy, was not bothered that I had been splattered across the business pages for all the wrong reasons. "Do you have waitressing experience?" Tommy asked me at my interview, which was held while he eyed me up and down, rubbing his hands in a dirty apron. "I have waited on people for 30 years, I said. It wasn't necessarily a lie. The work was more difficult than what it took to manage million-dollar portfolios, believe it or not. At least hedge fund managers said please when they condescended to us. Murphy's breakfast crowd treated waitresses like walking coffee pots with the unfortunate byproduct of having opinions. But I learned. I was forced to. The tips paid for my insulin. The shifts kept me busy enough that I had no time to dwell on how amazingly my life had disintegrated. And the work was honest in a sense that made me feel clean again. 3 months in, I possessed what Tommy preferred to call interpersonal skills, and what I called the ability to smile while fantasizing about spiking someone's coffee. That is when Harrison Blackwell came into my life. It was a Thursday morning in March, a day on which Chicago could not decide whether it wanted to be spring or winter. So it decided to be terrible instead. The morning rush for breakfast traffic was tapering when he strode in like he owned not just the diner, but the entire city block, designer suit, Italian leather shoes, and the kind of watch that could pay my bills for the past 6 months. He was likely in his mid-50s, with silver gray hair and the air of confidence that came with a man who'd never had the word no spoken to anything he desired. He got into booth 7, got out his phone, and started conducting what sounded like a hostile takeover over speakerphone, because clearly, common courtesy was for those who couldn't afford 1,000 suits. "Excuse me," I spoke, walking over to his table with my most respectful customer service smile. "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice or take that call outside. Other customers are trying to have their breakfast." Harrison Blackwell glared at me like I'd volunteered to donate one of my kidneys to charity. His pale blue eyes gave me a swift assessment, putting me in the category of furniture and minor nuisance. "I'll have coffee. Black and whatever passes for eggs Benedict here," he stated, never even breaking his phone conversation concerning obliterating some of the competition's quarterly projections. I filled his coffee cup, noting that his papers were scattered across the table as if he was conducting board meetings at the United Nations. Financial statements, merger contracts, and takeover proposals. My seasoned eye could not help but pick up on all too recognizable warning signs in the pieces of paper. Old habits die hard like cement. 20 minutes in, he was still yapping, now talking about some real estate deal in Miami with enough heft to awaken the dead. The other customers were firing dirty glances, and Tommy was in my face with the "handle this, or you're fired" glare behind the counter. "Sir?" I tried once more. "I need you to hold on," he said to the phone and then to me with the expression of a man talking to a slow child. "Do you understand that this call is worth more than you're ever going to make in your life?" The diner hung in silence. Even the coffee pot stopped percolating as if waiting breathlessly for what came next. I peered at the papers scattered across his desk. Blackwell Enterprises, real estate purchases, tech startup ventures, and there, in plain sight in the papers scattered about, the kind of leverage patterns and cash flow ratios that had awakened me during the night when I had seen them in other portfolios. "In fact," I informed him, my words clear enough for the entire diner to hear, "I understand you have everything to lose that you think you own." He blinked, rather amazed by his waitress's having opinions about his business empire. "I'm sorry, those leverage ratios don't appear to be good. Your cash flow structure doesn't appear to be sound, and from where I sit, you've got more debt than your asset base can responsibly manage." Silence in the diner was now complete. Harrison Blackwell stared at me like I'd started talking in ancient Greek. "Sorry," Harrison answered, his voice dripping with disdain, "but I don't recall asking for financial advice from the waitress." The words hit the diner like a slap. Several of the customers laughed, the ugly type of laughter that happens when someone in power embarrasses someone without. Tommy flushed, but he didn't do anything. Not for a waitress standing up to a customer who probably spent more on lunch than Murphy's made in a week. I felt the heat of shame rise up my neck, the same feeling I'd had for every news outing, every court outing, every time someone gave me that look, like I was the scammer instead of the scam victim. But then I looked down at those papers again, at the geometry that did not lie, even when everyone else did. "You're right," I said, my voice as cold as winter. "You didn't need to ask, but if you had, I'd tell you to get a complete audit of your financial arrangement before you're too late. What I can see from here suggests you're flirting with serious trouble." Harrison's laugh was humorless and cold. "Is that so? And what in the universe makes you think you're qualified to have such outrageous predictions regarding my company?" "Experience," I said factually. "I've seen enough balance sheets to know the red flags, even from scraps of paper on a diner table." His color started to leave. "That's enough," he said, rising and folding his papers. "I don't know where you think you learned to read financial statements, but Catherine Wells?" I breathed. He did not move. "Wells & Associates Money Consulting. I had 30 years of portfolio management experience under my belt before my son destroyed my business. I've seen more fiscal disasters than you've sat in board meetings, and your case has all the traditional warning signs." Harrison glared at me for a full beat, his face going through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Impossible," he growled, but his voice was not genuine. "I'd have to examine your whole finances in order to be certain," I said, taking a cup of coffee in hands no longer shaking. "But if you want a professional opinion, I'll return tomorrow." He left without paying for his eggs, Benedict. The next morning greeted us with gray and rain. Typical Chicago spring weather that could not seem to decide if it was going to be dismal or just always a bother. I was opening Murphy's at 6 a.m. just as every Thursday, when I noticed the knock on the glass door. Harrison Blackwell stood there in the rain, his eyes bloodshot, looking as though he had not slept in weeks. His designer suit was wrinkled. His otherwise perfect hair was disheveled, and he was holding a manila folder against his chest as if it contained the secrets of the universe. I opened the door, noticing that his Italian leather shoes were soaked. "We're not open for another hour," I said to him. "I need to talk to you," he said to me, speaking in a tone that stayed low and rich. "About what you told me yesterday." I stepped aside to let him in, flipping on the lights and turning on the coffee machine automatically. The diner was another place at this hour, quieter, more honest somehow, as if secrets could be shared more readily before the rest of the world was awake. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded, sitting again in the same booth he'd used yesterday. His fingers were slightly shaking as he unfastened the folder and disgorged papers across the table. "I spent last night going through my books," he said. "Ordered my accountant to produce summary reports, drawn 2 years of records." He filled his coffee cup and noticed the dark circles around his eyes. "And you were right." The words poured out like he was admitting to a murder. As for the warning signs, the leverage problems, all of it. "My accountant tells me we've got somewhere around 4 months or so until the creditors start circling." I settled in with him face to face despite myself. In my old life, clients came to me before they reached the cliff edge, not while they were careening into free fall. "How did you catch it so quickly?" he asked. "My own finance team didn't catch what you did in 20 minutes. Your people are getting paid to tell you what you wish to hear," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "I'm not." Harrison chuckled, but there wasn't laughter. Plain speaking from the woman I verbally abused in front of a group of strangers. Irony is some of that. There generally is. He leaned forward, his blue eyes aglow. "I need you, Catherine. I don't know what that means or how much it will cost, but I need someone to see beyond and get me a sense of whether there's a way out of this disaster." "I'm a waitress," I told him. "You're Catherine Wells," he replied. "And despite everything that had happened, you were one of the most financially sophisticated people in Chicago before your son destroyed your company." I felt a glow of something in my chest, something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Professional pride, maybe, or just plain happiness at being recognized for doing something good for a change, rather than just being applauded for my son's bad behavior. "What are you asking me, precisely? Save your company?" I parroted, making sure I'd understood him correctly. "Mr. Blackwell?" I pour coffee and take egg orders. I had not done a financial consulting project in 2 years, and when I last did, it had ended with FBI raids and criminal investigations. "Because your son was a thief," Harrison said bluntly, "not because you were incompetent." The words hung there between us. It was the first time in 2 years that someone had made that difference without being paid to act as my lawyer. "In addition," he continued, "what have you got to lose? You're waiting tables in a neighborhood where the sirens sing lullabies. I'm offering you a chance to be what you were born to be. And if I don't succeed, if your business goes under anyway," Harrison shrugged, "then I'll go down knowing I did everything, including swallowing my pride and taking advice from a waitress." I studied his face for desperation or deceit. Both were there, but under that was something else. Respect, maybe, or just recognition that pride was something he could no longer afford. "I'd have to do this the legal way," I said slowly. "I maintained my Series 66 license and kept my LLC in good standing." "Old habits. Never thought I'd be having to use them again. You still have your credentials." Planning finances was my life for 30 years. Even when it all came crashing down, I couldn't quite let go completely. Harrison's expression altered to one nearing relief. "Then we can do this properly." "I'd need unrestricted access," I continued. "All bank statements, all loan papers, all contracts and agreements, no secrets, no off-limits files. Done. I'd need a mandate to make recommendations. If I say to you, reorganize something, you do it. If I say to you, sell an asset, you think about it. You understand. And I'd need my original rate of consulting," I said, naming a fee that made his eyebrows jump. "An equity if we can turn it around. If I save your business, I have a share in it." Harrison said nothing for a while, balancing benefit and risk with the desperation of a man drowning being offered a life preserver that might be made of concrete. "Agreed," he finally said. "But I do have one condition, which is, we position this as bringing in independent strategic consulting. Professional turnaround experience? My board doesn't need to know you've worked for Murphy's." I'd nearly laughed. From senior partner to waitress to solo consultant. At least this trajectory was trending upward again. "Embarrassed to have to admit you found your consultant in a diner." "Embarrassed to have to admit I have outside aid needs at all," he corrected. "My firm's reputation is in shambles, fair enough. In business, admitting weakness was like chugging shark-infested water." "When do we start?" I asked. "Now?" Harrison picked up his phone and called. James Harrison. Can you get a full financial package done for Wells Strategic Consulting? Everything? Yes, everything. I want it done by noon. He hung up and looked at me with something close to hope. Back in the game, Catherine Wells. I poured his coffee for him, my hands finally calm after months. Let's just hope I remember how to play. Harrison's office occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Blackwell Tower with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Lake Michigan that probably cost more per square foot than most people paid for their homes. As his assistant, James handed over the detailed financial reports to me. I couldn't help but feel like an archaeologist opening up an ancient city. Mr. Blackwell is otherwise occupied until 3, James told me. His tone suggesting that former waitresses turned independent consultants fell below office machinery on his respect grid. Perfect, I said to her, settling into the conference room with my coffee. I do more work without a crowd. 3 hours later, I understood why Harrison looked like a man waiting in line for his own execution. Blackwell Enterprises wasn't just losing money. It was hemorrhaging like a trauma victim in an emergency ward. The Miami real estate project alone was a money disaster that overshadowed the Titanic as a navigation error. But buried in the chaos, I found something interesting. A trail of investments not exactly in keeping with the rest of Harrison's portfolio. Biotech startups, biomedical research, alternative energy projects, all with low but steady returns while his flashier business deals fell apart. When Harrison returned from his meetings, he came back to find me redrawing his entire financial strategy on the whiteboard, as if I were plotting a war strategy. How awful is it? He asked, loosening his tie. Worse than I imagined, I said, finishing my marker. But not as bad as it looks. I guided him through the breakdown, explaining how his ego had led him to go for the big-ticket deals and overlook the plotting, unglamorous investments that were actually paying off. His face grew paler with every revelation. So what you're saying, he said slowly, is that I'm a moron. I'm saying you're a successful businessman who started to think he was his own press releases, I said. There is a difference, though the end result is surprisingly the same. Harrison smiled in spite of himself. Brutal honesty again. You wanted someone who wouldn't blow sunshine up your assets, I said to him. I'm doing what I said I would do. In the week that followed, I put together a rescue strategy that was as surgical as any military strike. Sell the Miami disaster to take haircuts, divest 3 underperforming subsidiaries, and double down on the quiet champions that no one was paying attention to. It would cost him his dignity to swallow Harrison's and acknowledge failure, but it would save the company. The board will want a proper explanation, Harrison said to me when I presented the proposal to him. These are ventures I've been fighting for 2 years. Then we'll give them a proper explanation. I said professional analysis, market statistics, the whole 9 yards. This is not about pride, Harrison. This is about being alive. The first test came at a board meeting on a rainy Thursday. I sat at the conference table as Wells Strategic Consulting officially unveiled the turnaround plan in front of 11 questioning faces. This is insane, declared Marcus Webb, the board chairman who'd been questioning Harrison's leadership for months. You're proposing that we abandon our most high-profile investments. I'm proposing that we abandon our most expensive mistakes, I said sternly and in a professional manner. The math is on the side of strategic divesting of money-losing ventures and realignment to profitable ventures. I walked them through the numbers, showing how the Miami project was hemorrhaging money with no path to profitability, and how the abandoned technology investments were reaping consistent returns. The board had voted 5-4, with 2 abstentions, but had passed. As the members stood waiting at the door to exit, Webb walked over to Harrison looking like a man who could smell blood in the water. It smells of desperation to hire outside consultants, Harrison, he breathed into his ear. The investors are wondering, how much longer before they lose all faith? As long as necessary to turn this company around, Harrison replied. Once Webb left, Harrison slumped in his chair like a pricked balloon. He's planning something, I thought. I know, Harrison replied. The question is whether or not we can save the company before he acts on it. We will, I stated firmly, stunned by my own resolve. We have to act quickly, though. Over the following 2 weeks, I implemented the restructuring plan with the precision of a surgeon. The Miami property was sold to a distressed asset specialist developer. The 3 underperforming units were disposed of with proceeds reallocated to debt reduction. The profitable tech investments were further capitalized. Harrison's company began to rebound, but Webb's defiance grew louder. He protested every step, asked for more board meetings, and made it clear he was preparing a case to oust Harrison. "He's not just trying to fire you," I told Harrison one evening as we reviewed quarterly estimates. "He's positioning for a takeover based on what? Pattern recognition. I've witnessed it before. Board chairman undermines the CEO, creates a crisis of confidence, then steps in to rescue the company. Typically involves scooping up more shares at distressed prices in the heart of the crisis." Harrison scowled at the financial statements scattered across his desk. "So what do we do?" "The same thing we've done. Save the company despite his interference. Make our success so obvious that the board can't do otherwise but rally behind you." But I had a feeling Webb wasn't going to make it easy. 3 weeks into business with him, I was still working late in Harrison's office when I stumbled upon the photograph concealed inside a loan agreement signed in 1987. A family photo. Harrison, maybe 20 years younger, his arm draped over a dark-haired woman with green eyes. 2 small children at their feet, a boy and girl who could not have been more than 5 and 7. "My family," Harrison had said in the doorway, catching me off guard. "Ex-family," I should set him straight. I held up the photo. "Divorce, death," he whispered quietly, taking a seat across from me. "Car accident. Drunken driver ran a red light when the kids were 8 and 10. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Harrison, I'm so sorry. It was 15 years ago," he said. But his tone carried the burden of someone who'd never quite moved on. Sarah was always reminding me that I worked too hard, that I was creating an empire for a family that didn't even get to see me. When they died, work was the only thing that remained for me. And now his desperate need to preserve the sense of the company. It wasn't about money or ego. It was about maintaining the one thing that gave his life meaning. "That's why you've been placing increasing riskier bets?" I asked quietly. "Because the safe bets remind you of what you lost?" Harrison was frozen for a very long time. "You're a pretty good psychologist as well as a financial genius." "I'm a mother," I replied. "I do know about loving someone that much that losing him breaks something inside you." "Your son, my son, broke something else," I said to him. "Faith mostly, but love that has to be killed again." We worked in comfortable quiet after that, both of us deeply focused on numbers that were worth more than profit and loss. They were worth hope, redemption, and the possibility of things being mended that were broken. The turnaround at the company was becoming harder to deny. Sales were flattening. Debt repayment was on track. Ellie and the profitable investments were far outperforming expectations. But Webb's battle against Harrison ratcheted up a notch. "He's scheduling another board meeting," Harrison informed me, reading from an email emergency session to address continued concerns over leadership decisions. "Let him," I replied. "We've got the numbers with us now." At midnight, Harrison had a car summoned to take me home. As I gathered my papers, he rested a soft hand on my arm. "Catherine," he said, "thank you, not just for the money advice, but for compassion." "Don't thank me yet," I told him. "We still have a company to save, and something tells me Webb's not finished with us." Long-awaited day arrived on a Tuesday in April. I was discussing quarterly projections when James burst into the conference room with a frazzled look on his face. "M. Wells," he said, "the FBI agents are in the lobby asking to see you." My blood chilled. It had been 2 years. I'd assumed the probes were over. But naturally, somebody had connected Catherine Wells, the advisor, with Catherine Wells of the financial scandal. "Do they have a warrant?" I said, my voice firmer than I was. "I don't know. Mr. Blackwell is handling it. But they are going out of their way to want to talk to you." I preceded Harrison into his office with the resignation of a man on the gallows. I could observe 2 agents in suits, their expressionless professional faces behind the glass walls. Ms. Wells, the one who was older, said something when I got there. Agent TNT Martinez, this is Agent Foster. We need to discuss your involvement with an active investigation. Which investigation? I said back. Corporate espionage and financial fraud. We believe you may have some information related to our case. A wave of relief swept through me. They were searching for information, not to arrest me. Your son Michael has been helpful to us, Agent Foster continued. He's provided us with information about a conspiracy of a number of financial institutions, including your former company. A conspiracy? There was someone, Michael explained, who approached him 3 years ago with a proposition to destabilize some of the financial advisory companies. The proposal was to purchase their client lists and assets at fire sale prices. The room spun a little. Someone approached Michael before the fraud. A board member of a large company, who is a business of acquiring troubled businesses. Michael claims this person provided him with extremely specific instructions on how to make the fraud look like a family business that failed. Harrison's face went white. You're claiming Catherine was targeted specifically? That's what we think. Yes. The fraud wasn't arbitrary. It was orchestrated so Wells and Associates could be disassembled and the assets acquired cheaply. Agent Martinez pulled out a photograph and placed it on the desk. Marcus Webb, sitting in what appeared to be a restaurant, with a young man I recognized as my son across from him. Do you recognize this man, Ms. Wells? I sat staring at the picture, having pieces click into place with monstrous precision. That is Marcus Webb. He's traveling with Mr. Blackwell Board of Directors. Mr. Webb has been investigated for 6 months. Agent Foster stated, we think he's been employing this method to acquire a number of companies, wreak financial havoc, then swoop in and purchase assets pennies on the dollar. Harrison sprang up immediately and moved to the window. That's the reason why he's tried to have me fired. If Blackwell Enterprises fails, he can purchase it himself. Just that. But with Ms. Wells helping to revive it, his plan is falling apart, so we require your help. What kind of help? I inquired. We require you to be present at tomorrow's board meeting, Agent Martinez said, with a wire. His emergency board meeting the next day was standing room only. Webb stood with his coalition of co-conspirators, clearly looking forward to being able to deliver the coup de grace to Harrison's leadership. The wire I had on set like a lead weight on my breastbone, but Agent Martinez in the earpiece was soothing and reassuring. Ladies and gentlemen, Webb began, pacing at the head of the conference table. We are here to rectify this ongoing state of financial instability of this company and the need for a leadership change. He began with a practiced speech about Harrison's poor judgment, questionable consulting choices, and the need for instant change. But I caught him glancing back and forth to mine, as if something familiar. But he couldn't place it. The numbers don't support your fears, Marcus, I said after he had finished speaking. Blackwell Enterprises has been improving month by month ever since the past 2 months. The revenue is settling down, debts are being trimmed, and profitable segments are expanding. Webb's expression turned black. And who might you be that you can conduct such evaluation? Wells's strategic consulting appears to have arisen out of thin air. Catherine Wells, former senior partner of Wells and Associates Financial Consulting, I stated, standing up slowly. You might remember my company. You helped destroy it 3 years ago. The room went quiet. Webb's face ran through a couple of colors before eventually settling on pale gray. I have no idea what you're talking about, he stated, but his voice was not sincere. FBI Agent Martinez would, I said, gesturing towards the exit. As though summoned by my words, the conference room doors opened and federal agents entered. Marcus Webb, Agent Martinez went on. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, corporate espionage, and racketeering. Amid the chaos that followed as Webb was led off in handcuffs, and some of the board members scrambled to get away from the heat, Harrison and I stood shoulder to shoulder by the windows. The wire recording had it all. Webb's admission that he'd been the cause of the failure of a number of companies, his plan to acquire Blackwell Enterprises, and enough evidence to connect him with the destruction of my initial company. So, Harrison said softly, what next? Now we start again, I said. Your company, my reputation, everything that they tried to ruin together. I thought of this fellow who had belittled me as a waitress and then left me in charge of saving all he treasured, who had stood up for me when the FBI showed up at my doorstep and never questioned my integrity. We shook on it. 6 months from that moment, Blackwell Enterprises was thriving with new management, and Catherine Wells was once again a name associated with financial prosperity, not scandal. Webb's Crimes insurance payout had put most of my initial clients back on their feet, and Wells Strategic Consulting had a turnaround waiting list of companies wanting turnaround experience. Sometimes the best revenge is just not to get back up when someone attempts to kill you. And sometimes, the most unlikely partnerships create the perfect foundation to rebuild everything you thought you'd lost for good. I was 70 years old when I understood it's never too soon to fight back. And sweetest is the win when that comes after someone has tried all they could to break you. Appreciate you listening. Don't forget to subscribe, Crib, and kindly share your story below in the comments. Your voice matters.